From their vantage point above the dimly lit blood ritual chamber, Mara Vale and the spider do their best to force down their rising bile. The scene below them is like a torturous fever dream come to life, a bloody symphony of pain and suffering. A score of mutilated and desecrated men and women hang suspended, upside down, over a central well, blood flowing from the countless unholy sigils that have been carved deep into their flesh. They thrash in agony, these forsaken souls, shrieking into blood-soaked gags by the light of guttering torches, but their efforts serve only to make their blood flow faster into the pool below. Mara tries to close her eyes to it, but nothing can shut out the horror. Grotesquely, she is put in mind of the milking of cows. From above, heavy pipes converge over the center of the pool, and more blood flows from here, a steady stream that the spider dimly registers must be sourced from the slaughter in the arena above. Burly men in leather aprons and gloves move around between the hanging victims, tending to their charges. Fresh sigils are periodically cut with long, cruel knives. Those who succumb to their wounds are unhooked and unceremoniously thrown aside, only to be replaced by fresh victims who are dragged, terrified and struggling, from the pens that surround the circular chamber. Mara turns to the spider, cold fury writ plain upon her face. "We end this," she hisses. "Now!" Hello and welcome to The Lone Adventurer, an actual play solo RPG podcast with me, Carl White. I will be your narrator, your game master and your guide as we follow our heroes on their journey into the unknown. For this game, I will be using the Lone Adventurer role-playing game rule set, as well as a variety of other systems, tools and tables as they take my fancy. A word of warning: the following scenes may contain mature themes and disturbing imagery. Listener discretion is advised. The adventure continues. Last time on The Lone Adventurer. The spider arranges a meeting with Heart of Snow, and in a deal that may very well come back to haunt her, is informed of the demon Satara's location, the city's fighting dens, the infamous blood pits. Worse is to come. The demon has bent the crowd to its will, turning them into a blood-crazed mob, and it appears to be feeding on their adulation. Against these impossible odds, the spider and Mara Vale sneak into the tunnels beneath the pits, determined to thwart the demon's plan. Hello again, and welcome back to The Lone Adventurer. I extend that welcome both to you and to myself. You see, for me, several months have elapsed since I wrote the last episode of this podcast. Through a combination of ill health, overwhelm, and creative burnout, I stopped dead, and I just couldn't find the motivation to carry on. Thankfully, I had decided to write at least 4 episodes before I started recording and releasing them, so at least the protracted pause took place between seasons 3 and 4 rather than mid-series. And equally thankfully, I seem to have recovered my mojo. That, in part, stems from recognizing that while I have loved learning and playing Daggerheart, and think it is an exceptional game, at least some of my sense of overwhelm has been the result of the complexity of that system. Not that it's especially complex. I have been GMing it fine for my home group, and it works great as a player. But for me, as a system for solo, I found that the cognitive load of running 2 Daggerheart characters alongside my GMing and writing duties too much to manage. In particular, I found the character management quite a lot and the prospect of building my entire party as Daggerheart characters completely impossible to face. So many choices, and so many moving parts to keep track of. Which is why, when I felt the creative juices starting to creep back in, I began casting about for a more lightweight system that would help me keep the story moving, but require minimal headspace. I considered returning to chasing adventure, but even that felt a bit too weighty for my current needs. I had been playing a little Calarath and loved the lightness and simplicity of that game. But for the lone adventurer, I felt it missed the narrative momentum generated by the partial success mechanic. And so I began looking for the lightest weight powered by the Apocalypse system that I could find. In addition to the original book, I have a couple of Dungeon World hacks on my shelves. The first, World of Dungeons by John Harper of the Blades in the Dark fame, is a triumph of minimalist game design, clocking in at only 3 pages. The second, Advanced World of Dungeons, is a little longer at 12 pages and adds just enough meat to the bones of World of Dungeons for my needs. And so, in true RPG hacker form, I spent several days creating my own hack of the hack of John Harper's Dungeon World hack, turned it into a solo first system by integrating it with my Great Machine Oracle, and lo and behold, the Lone Adventurer role-playing game was born. And with it, the relaunch of Season 4. I could not be happier. Strap in. The Harvesters are taken completely unawares. So engrossed in their grisly work are they that they fail to spot Mara as she creeps into the chamber, taking advantage of the shadows offered by a burned-out torch. The muffled cries of their victims drown out the sounds of her unbarring first one and then another of the prisoner cells. And so there is no warning until their captives, armed with half a dozen of Mara's knives, come racing out of their pens and into close combat with a ferocity born of unbearable desperation. Mara is among them too, and mercilessly hacking down her foes in a ballet of bloodletting. Though it is notable that for all her considerable skill with the blade, her typical precision and finesse are conspicuously absent. This is martial prowess fueled by pure rage. And yet all of this is merely diversion, a savage sleight of hand intended to obfuscate the true purpose. The spider steps from the shadows, unnoticed by the combatants in the fury of their melee, and silently approaches the well of tears at the chamber's centre. She reaches into her sleeve, removes a small, ornate reliquary she has been hiding there, and opens it. The orange diamond, seated in velvet, is dazzling, utterly mesmerizing. It is the size of a duck's egg, its perfect facets shimmering and scintillating in the flickering torchlight in a way that utterly beguiles. It is entirely beyond compare. She had not expected so magnificent a treasure when she approached the head of Cadmus's monastery, the Hieromere of the Waters. She had explained to the high priest the dangers they faced in tracking down and confronting the demon Satara, but not in her wildest dreams had she expected the old man to produce something of this transcendent brilliance in response to her plea.
"This stone is known as the Heart of Ankra," the Hieromere had explained. "It has been in the possession of the Order since the Shattering. Whether it is truly a fragment of the Thrice-Blessed I cannot say, but whatever its origin, its power is indisputable. I do not offer this sacred relic to you lightly. Under any normal circumstances I would not dream of doing so. But these are extraordinary times, and they call for extraordinary measures. A demon lord set loose upon the world represents an existential threat. It will seek to consolidate and grow its power, and left unchecked, its corruption will bleed into our very reality, tainting and altering it at a fundamental level. This cannot stand. But neither should you accept this gift lightly, for the heart is the source that powers the pool of echoes. With the heart removed, the healing properties of the pool will begin to wane, and as they do, our ability to keep the body of your companion alive will diminish also. For her sake, as much as for the Order's, you must return the heart, safely and soon. I hope you understand. This is a terrible risk we both take."
The spider gazes down at the jewel, momentarily hesitant. Then she plucks it from its velvet cushion and drops it into the blood-filled well. Despite her lack of combat prowess, one of the spider's abilities is very powerful. It reads, "Mastermind. Once per session, you have laid a plan for exactly this situation." I use this as a way for her to access the flashback mechanics that work so well in Blades in the Dark. In this regard, at least, she's like Batman, always thinking 3 moves ahead. In this case, I envisaged that she had devised a plan to secure some sort of sacred artifact in advance of this mission, something that would counter the demon's unholy power. I then used one of the downtime mechanics I'd created for my game system, also as part of this flashback. In the Lone Adventurer RPG, when a PC has downtime, they get to choose one of 2 options: recover or prepare. In either case, they make a roll and add their most appropriate stat score from either soldier, scoundrel, scholar, smith, or speaker. Here is what my rules say about making rolls. When you attempt something risky, sum 2d6 and add one of your stats based on the action you are taking. Envisage a consequence of failure. A total of 6 or less is a miss, things don't go well, and the risk turns out badly. Make a GM move. A total of 7 to 9 is a partial success. You do it, but there is some cost or compromise, retribution or harm. Make a GM move. A total of 10 or more is a full success. You do it without complication. And a total of 12 or more is a critical success. You do it perfectly, to some extra benefit or advantage. I'll dial back the detail on the game rules for now, but if you're interested in taking a look at the Lone Adventurer RPG, I have added a link to it in the show notes. Please feel free to use it or make your own hack of it, as you see fit. Anyway, I had the spider make a speaker roll for her to persuade the head of Cadmus's order to help out, and I got a partial success. The head monk could help, but there were going to be consequences. A couple of card draws from the tarot deck and a quick follow-up question helped me figure out what those consequences might be. Screw this up, and Mina dies. Next, Mara and the spider made a group roll to creep into the ritual chamber, led by Mara. The spider rolled a partial success, adding nothing to the total, but Mara rolled a critical success. I envisaged that extra benefit as her being able to liberate the prisoners and have them attack alongside her. That left the spider free to make her approach. You'll notice I've chosen to create this battle scene without using any actual combat rolls. That's because, for me, the fight really is just a backdrop, a bit of narrative colour to underpin the important stuff. The meat of this scene, the bit that actually matters, is what the spider is about to do. Let's find out how that goes. The demon surveys its works and is pleased. The mob, baying for blood, urge the fighters on the arena floor onto ever greater feats of daring and brutality. Their blood, shed in violence and in rage, mingles with that of the captives below, their terror and their pain adding the most exquisite, lingering and bitter aftertaste. And the loop just feeds upon itself. With each sip of that heady brew, the demon's power and influence grow. And as they grow, The crowd is whipped up into still greater frenzy, and the bloodletting intensifies still more, and so it goes. It can feel it already, the way the city beyond the arena is stretching to accommodate this hideous new reality. If words are spells that shape and define reality, then deeds are more powerful spells still. And the more potent and protracted those deeds, the greater the spell that is wrought. The city, already twisted and brutalized by terrorism and civil war, is slowly bending to its profane will. Soon, the demon thinks, soon this contagion shall spread. The minds of men, malleable and weak, will learn at first to cope with and then accept this cruel new shape of truth that grows like a malignant cancer at the heart of their civilization. In time, they will learn to love it, to crave it, to beg for it. And there, at the center of it all, growing ever more powerful, ever more supreme, shall sit the demon prince, the lord of the chained world, Sitara. It salutes a particularly vicious slaying, prompting a feral roar from the crowd, and draws deep on its blood tube. And pauses. There are some spells more potent than mere words or deeds, it recalls belatedly. Spells that were woven into the creation of the cosmos at the dawn of time by the very creators themselves. Immutable laws of existence that no mere demonic corruption can usurp. It tastes one such spell now, an incontrovertible, primal truth so inimical to its nature that mere proximity would burn like cleansing fire. And it has swallowed it. The agonized roar that echoes around the stadium shatters the glamour that has held the crowd in the demon's thrall. In an instant, bloodlust is replaced by utter panic as the thing in the golden throne begins to swell and grow, writhing in pain. All trappings of civility fall away, and the diabolical creature is revealed in all its blasphemous grotesquerie. As the demon claws at what passes for its throat, the crowd stampedes for the exits. Mechanically, this scene couldn't have been simpler. The spider, rolling her scholar stat, rolled boxcars to activate the monastic artifact a critical success, and that meant a complete success with something extra on top. I decided the something extra was that Sitara was going to drink some of this consecrated blood, which left just one more question. What effect would that have? The Deep Oracle double draw from the tarot deck answered that question in the clearest possible terms. The Five of Cups is a deeply inauspicious card representing regret, failure, and grief. Not a card you ever want to see in a tarot draw, unless, of course, you're drawing on behalf of a demon. This card told me things were about to go very badly wrong for Sitara. And then the second card, as perfect a draw as I could have hoped for. The Devil, reversed. Quite apart from the obvious symbolism of the card name and its orientation, which spoke directly to the reversal the demon now faced, the attached meanings of liberation, detachment, and release gave me clues as to the nature of this reversal. The crowd had been freed from its spell. One of the nice things about playing solo is that you are free to shift the narrative perspective as the mood strikes you, and in this case, it seemed natural for me to switch to Sitara's point of view, to see firsthand the consequences of the spider's actions. As it turned out, that switch gave me an interesting insight into the demon's motivations that I'd not really been aware of before. By stepping into its shoes for the first time since it was introduced, I was able to learn far more about what makes this villain tick. I've noticed, as I've been playing and writing this episode, that the mental overwhelm I'd been feeling after completing the last episode has completely evaporated. It has been useful to assess where that overwhelm came from. In part, it came from me, the internal. I was tired, unwell, and doing too much. And just like the last time I took an extended break, I needed a lengthy period of rest and recovery to find my way back to a state of creative flow. But another part, perhaps just as significant, was the external. I've already mentioned how my choice of a comparatively crunchy rule set had made things harder, and how switching to a lighter rule set has, so far, been a helpful way of addressing that. But the other aspect I need to consider is the complexity of my game world. One of the joys of starting a solo RPG is that you are stepping out into the unknown. Everything is new and fresh and waiting to be discovered. You have significant creative freedom. At this point in The Lone Adventurer, there are countless people, places, factions, plots, plans and counterplans all in flight. My starting party of 1 has ballooned into a wide cast of leading characters with more villains and perils and lore to keep track of than you can shake a stick at. It's a lot. And I think that when combined with everything else, it's that cognitive load that has proven too much for me to manage. This is a risk for the solo player. You alone are the keeper of the records, the one who has to make sure that you are adhering to the ever-expanding internal logic of your own narrative creation. Because unless you are quite disciplined, the open-ended nature of the solo RPG narrative means that things have a tendency to continually expand, rather than come to a satisfying conclusion as they might in a novel or a film. So, my takeaway is this. It's time for me to apply some story contraction. Time to narrow things down and close off some story threads. We'll see how that works out over time, but for now, it's time to step away from my battles and return to those of our heroes. Even from down here, they can hear the screams and the pounding of thousands of feet. Mara looks up from cleaning her blade, her grisly work done. The demon's servants have been slaughtered to a man. Well, whatever you did, Spider, you got a reaction. The spider fishes the priceless gem from the now sanctified pool, wipes it swiftly, and returns it to the reliquary. Standing, she beckons the warrior to follow her. Quickly, Mara. I suspect we don't have much time. From the sound of things, the demon has lost control of the crowd. That suggests it is weakened, though I don't know for how long. We will never have a better time than now to strike. We must find it. Is that right? Grunts Mara, sheathing her sword and hurrying after the older woman. Just how do you propose to do that? The spider smiles. I imagine we'll simply need to run in the opposite direction to everybody else. Her words prove prophetic. They are able to leave the tunnels below the arena with considerably greater ease than they entered them. The various guards, jailers, trainers, and assorted thuggery that had been so formidable coming in are in a state of utter panic going out. With the shattering of the demon's glamour, the will that had bound them to its service is shattered also. They are in just as great a state of confusion and terror as the rest of the crowd. And when they make it outside, it is immediately obvious where they need to go. Much of the crowd has already dispersed, and those that remain are doing their best to escape as quickly as possible, and for good reason. The VIP viewing box has collapsed beneath the swelling, erupting bulk of the demon, sending it tumbling to the bloody arena floor. Unable to coexist with the hallowed liquid it has ingested, its form bulges and blisters, vomiting out an uncontrollable eruption of riotous, bursting pustules leaking caustic fluids. Eyes, limbs, and shrieking, toothed mouths spew from the central mass, forming momentarily, then collapsing back into glistening, tumorous growths, its bulk distending grotesquely, growing ever larger, ever more nightmarish. It is unspeakable to look upon. Mara and the spider stumble to a halt, momentarily incapable of processing what they are seeing. It is Mara who finally breaks the silence. You want me to kill that? The spider pulls herself together. No, And even if I did, I don't believe you could. No, what I want from you, Mara, is an opening. Follow me. She scrambles down a ladder, her feet hitting the sand of the arena as she jumps the last few feet. Without looking back to check that the warrior is following, she sprints towards the bloated horror, seemingly hell-bent on running straight into it. Mara, hot on her heels, cries out, "What in the name of the sacred seven do you think you're doing, Spider? Stop!" But her cries seemingly fall on deaf ears. The spider shows no sign of slowing down. They have mere moments before contact. So, Satara goes full Tetsuo on us, and the spider seems to have lost her mind. What the deuce, you might very well be forgiven for asking. So let's backtrack a little and see where that rather sudden escalation came from. I kicked off the scene with the normal procedure. I envisaged the scene as an escape from the tunnels under the pit fights and asked my usual "does the scene start as expected?" question. And once again, the answer was yes. Next, I asked whether there was a direct route up to the pitmaster's box from where they were, which I figured was unlikely. I rolled 2d6, took the worst, and got a no but. What did that but mean? I wasn't sure, and so I asked another question of my simple oracle, and this time I asked, has Satara fled? Which I thought was likely. However, that but from the previous question I'd asked gave me some pause. Maybe it related to the fleeing? As a result, I reduced the odds to 50-50 and I rolled a no and. That result, combined with the previous answer, suggested to me that the demon was temporarily incapacitated. It couldn't teleport, it couldn't run, and it was drawing a lot of attention. I then spent a little while thinking about what form that incapacitation might take. What does it look like, I wondered, when the matter and antimatter of the divine and the demonic combine? And the result, it turned out, was the climactic scene of Akira. It would be fascinating and probably deeply disturbing for me to go back through the entirety of the episodes written for this podcast to date with a psychodynamic therapist along for the ride. A deep dive into the interpretations of my subconscious, as triggered by the various oracle prompts and dice rolls that this game throws up, would likely keep them in beer and pizza for the rest of their life. Suffice to say, if I were to draw a map of the various layers of consciousness that have been excavated through playing this game, this most recent section would feature a little swimming dragon with a small swirly scroll above its head reading, "Here be monsters." I have been reliably informed that it doesn't pay to gaze too long into the abyss, so let us draw a veil over these vertiginous depths, dear listener, and remind ourselves that this is, after all, just a bit of fun. I'll see you for more of the same next time. You have been listening to The Lone Adventurer, a solo RPG podcast played, written and performed by me, Carl White. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider telling your friends about it or leaving a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts. It really is a huge help. You can follow me on BlueSky at theloneadventurer.bsky.social. Email me at theloneadv@gmail.com or follow my blog at carlillustration.wordpress.com. You can find show notes for this episode and all others at theloneadventurer.podbean.com, where I include any links mentioned in the episode, as well as mechanics information. I also include a link to a full episode transcript. The story will continue in the next episode of The Lone Adventurer. Thank you for listening.